Hey guys, you're here with Mitch and Toddy for another episode of the U-Spray podcast. Miss Toddy, how are you, bro? What's the good word? What do you got?
Not much, man. Same old, same old.
Same old.
Weather's amazing. The pool was money yesterday.
Yeah.
This morning at the gym, the freaking breeze at the beach the water was amazing.
Yeah.
Don't get many days like this.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. It's good to, when we do catch up, we like to go and have a lift and a coffee and, talk shop. It's a good way to start the day, get all that done before the sun rises. So, it was a good start to the day, bro. And we have a couple of days of training coming up. So that will be exciting. We have a few people coming in. We have a fair few apprentices from a couple of different businesses over the next couple of days, which will be cool. They left the spray teaching up to us because they don't have the patience to teach them. Kind of sounds like my dad a little bit when I was learning how to drive in my mum's manual car. I remember I was just, bunny hopping and, crunching the gears, and Dad was like, nah, let me out. I cannot sit through this anymore. Your mother can teach you how to drive. Once you learn how to drive, let me know, and then I'll hop back in the car because I cannot handle this. So, as you can tell, my dad was a little bit impatient, but my mum taught me how to drive a stick, and then Dad was happy to sit in the car with me after that. So, who taught you how to drive, Mr. Toddy?
Hey, know it is when you're a young teenager. You teach yourself how to drive.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
I think early on in the States you go through like a driving permit. You got to do all your hours.
Yep.
I think my first sort of drives with my dad, but then probably most of it was done with my mom. My mom usually sort of owned that space, I think.
Yep.
My little brother Nate taught me how to drive manual. It's kind of funny. Which is crazy because when you move to Australia, whether you can drive manual or not, you automatically get an open license.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, because we're naturally better at everything over there.
Yeah.
But I've been driving manual since I was 16. Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
There you
go. So today on this episode, we're gonna dive into a little bit about like in the past we've sort of spoken a little bit about setting up your machine and choosing the right machine. But the other thing is when it comes to tip selection for a machine. Now, for someone starting out, or even someone might be doing a new substrate, or might be using a different product they're not used to, what would you give as a general guide when it comes to finding the right tip for the job?
It's kind of a tricky one, really, because obviously depending on the brand you use, the thickness is going to be different. Depending on the quality of it, the thickness will be different between a trade product and a premium product. Depending on where you're applying it, will make it different. Obviously, you want to use a bit more body if you're spraying bricks or something like that just absorbs it a fair bit. But I think that basically what I tell people is, most specifications, if you open up and have a look, it'll give you a rough recommendation. And in general, the two reasons why they would do that, one is to give you the best opportunity to achieve spec, because warranties are important and you got to apply a warranty to your job. And typically there's a specification of how thick it's got to be able to withstand the elements of wherever it is, whether it's outside in the sun or inside a laundry room where it can be exposed to moisture, there's mold and that sort of stuff. And so you want to make sure that you're using what's recommended to ensure that you get the right thickness on the surface so that it can protect it from all that stuff. So, so typically, there's a general guide around what size to use, but I don't really like how they do it. A lot of them, they'll say, we recommend a X 17 thou tip, which is kind of bad information, really,
because there's a difference between a 5.17 and 4.17.
Yeah, it's a pretty massive difference, actually. Yeah, so it's kind of good. Some of them will give you, use a 5.17 or use a 4.15 or whatever. It's like, that's great, because that's pretty good recommendation. But there's a lot of things that come into play though. They're all general guide anyways. So I mean, for example, an experienced painter would have really confident, great speed, great technique, all that sort of stuff. Based on what they recommend, he might be quicker than that. And or someone who's brand new might be slower than that. And so you'll find the slower ones more prone to run. So then in that case, the 517 in that instance is probably not the right tip to give them. So you give them a 515, which will slow it down roughly 15%. Maybe that's the right tip. And so there's such a spectrum there, and everyone's different, So, you see people you have to use a 310 or a 410 or 210. It's like, no, bro, that's not actually accurate because you and I don't spray the same, And so it's actually kind of silly to recommend that. And the trade-off is potentially you're not getting enough paint on there. So you're gonna when the warranty claim comes out, you're gonna be held liable because it wasn't on thick enough, or you've put it on too thick, and now you got runs to deal with, which is a problem in itself. So it drags out the length of the job. The other reason why someone would have a recommendation for tips, typically an example of that is ceiling flats. Most ceiling flats have like a thick substrate, really rough aggregate in it, that if you go to a tip too small, the aggregate's too big and it actually blocks the tip. And so they'll recommend, in this case, most roof membrane or roof ceiling paints in Australia, from what I've seen, will recommend a 19th thou tip, not a 17th thou tip. The reason for that is because it's the least likely to cause tip blockages. And also it gives a nice film build as well. So one of the biggest pet peeves, man, is you see guys going into a house and using a really small fine finish tip to spray cornice. And it's like, anybody who does it knows that it won't spray it unless you put a really fine red filter in it. But the problem is now you're filtering out all the good stuff from the paint. And so you might as well just use crappy paint on the ceiling. The corner, I mean, you're protected inside because it's less likely to fail inside because there's no sun hitting everything, But yeah, so there's a few things that sort of come into play when you're doing that. So, typically when I recommend something, I've done it, from my, this is what I use. This is why I use it. I know it hits film thickness, and I know you're not going to get tip blockages, so use it. So that's typically how you do it. And then the other thing that really bothers me, which we talk about all the time, is people use fine finish tips for everything, and it's fine. Okay, it's like, I'm not saying you can't do that. You shouldn't do that.
Excuse the pun. Yeah. Using fine finish. Yeah, fine finish. It's fine. Yeah, I like it.
But the problem is, typically a fine finish tip is designed to really atomize the paint, really break it down, really break it down. And you can tell because when you're spraying like a door, for example, with like a 310 fine finish tip, if someone walks by, you can actually see the overspray go. They feel like there's not a lot of overspray, but it's actually designed to really atomize the paint, which actually promotes overspray. So you actually get overspray. And so what happens is
you're wasting paint as well.
Absolutely. They don't feel like it because compared to what they're used to with the big tip, it's not as noticeable. But definitely carries a long way. But what I hate is guys use these fine finish tips to spray weatherboards outside, garage doors. Again, nothing wrong with that. But the trade-off is typically the actual like a 516 fine finish tip versus a 515 low pressure tip or a HEA tip. The 515, even though it's smaller and letting out less paint, will probably achieve a thicker film thickness, more to spec, because the way it's crushing it down, you'll see it when you spray fine finish tips, ultra fine, beautiful. Okay, so so our recommendation for guys who want to use a fine finish, I get it. It looks amazing, it's awesome. But you have to be measuring that. Okay, I see guys all the time using a 312 fine finish tip for weatherboards. Okay, so typically, if you look at the spec of, say, Weather Shield or Solar Guard or something, they'll probably recommend a 517 tip, maybe a 515. Okay, so if say it's a 517 tip, 517 tip delivers 1.17 liters a minute. A 310 tip, I think, delivers 0.4 liters a minute. So it's like, if you apply those at the same rate, I mean, technically the 312 would be a bit thicker than a 512. So say 512 versus 517. 512 will deliver 30% the amount of paint. So it's like, it covers great, looks amazing, but when that starts to fade, almost all external fades that aren't blue or green or wild color or because it's not on thick enough. And it's probably because they use the fine finish tip because they want to control the overspray. I get it, makes sense. But if you get out a wet film thickness comb and measure it, it will not be the spec. Fine, if you're going to do 4 or 5 coats to make up for it. If it's a third the thickness of a 517 that needs 2 coats, it means you need 6 coats with a 510 to make it get there. So it's actually, if you knew that and you can work that into your job, great. Okay, but what's going to happen is it's going to fade in a month, 2 months, 6 months, whatever, a year. You're going to be brought out there. You're going to go to your rep and say, hey, man, this is failing. Your paint sucks. I used to laugh all the time because you'd go on these drives with the sales reps. Oh, that's so-and-so's paint. It's fading. It's shit. It's like, bro, they just didn't apply it on thick enough. Same thing would happen to your paint. And yeah, so that's almost always. And the reason we're telling people this is because it's stressful. And when you go to your rep and they're going to come out, they're going to take a sample, they're going to send it away and measure it. It's not going to be the spec. And they're going to tell you to your face, you didn't put on 2 coats. And you'll know in your heart of hearts that you did exactly what you were told. They might even recommend the tip to you. That's the funny thing.
Well, my personal favorite, even if you did achieve spec, you didn't prep it properly.
Yes. Yes, but it's like that's why we're educating people this stuff, because if you know it, you can design your process to really reduce the risk of having a failure and getting a call back. Because if it fades, I can guarantee you it'll be your fault, And it's like, just knowing that, it's important. It's like, you would rather do an extra coat or extra 2 coats with a really small tip to ensure you get the thickness than coming back in 6 months and having to do it all over again at your cost.
What about guys that say, yeah, but I'm using a fine finish low pressure tip?
Yeah. So
I'm, HEA low pressure tip, fine finish low pressure tip. Like, it's fine. It looks better. It's a low pressure tip. So
man, like that's the thing too, is I prefer the low pressure tips on most external surfaces anyways, because the droplets are bigger, covered it better, so you get less flashing. So flashing gets greatly increased the chances of that by using a fine finish tip, like insanely. So if you're getting flashing and using a fine finish tip, just use a low pressure tip. And they do it because they want the fine finish, but a low pressure tips come up money. And if you put it on wet, nice and heavy, it's going to settle down anyways. And so it comes up money. And most substrates are like this, or weatherboards or whatever. They're not even smooth unless you're Daryl Hathaway and you sand it like a freaking, a million times. Yeah, but most of them are pretty imperfect anyway. So it's not going to improve the finish. If anything, it might actually highlight imperfections in the surface more because it's so fine. Things like this, that it's just basic math. The lack of understanding around that's insane. And it's just funny because like everyone's an expert, everyone knows. I'm not even an expert. It's like, I know this stuff because I've tested it. I do it. I'm weird in that regard. Like
you are weird. I know. Yep.
But I spend hours and hours and hours.
Because you're passionate about it.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
And it's not even I'm passionate about spray. I am. I love it. But I'm just passionate about helping people get it, because I would hate to know how many jobs get redone because of just one little lack of knowledge. And the paint companies don't give a crap. They're just like, here, have some paint, do it again.
Well, this is the way that I look at it, man. It's like, you know what? At the end of the day, man, if you use low pressure tips, you use high pressure tips, you use fine finish tips, if it works for you and you're going to warrant it yourself and you're happy to run the gauntlet, then so be it. But the way that I look at it, and it really opened my eyes when I did it for the first time, is that why not just get a wet film thickness gauge and just measure it, and the interesting thing is that what we find when we do training with guys and we talk about this and we get them to spray it on at the speed they spray and we measure it, we actually work out on interior stuff that some of the guys are putting way too much paint on. So you actually find out that, we've had guys come and spray that have been spraying for a while. This is my natural speed. And we're like, mate, as per spec, you've got enough paint on there for to finish it. But, you need to go a bit lighter. You need to move a bit faster. So you can actually find the opposite, where you might actually start saving a bit of paint because you're putting way too much on. So that's the other side of the coin as well. But I do want to circle back to one thing that I think is truly important. And, I I found, out the hard way when I did this, and it was, you know, going. You mentioned a 517 to a 417 tip. All right. Now I've made the mistake, and I know a lot of guys have, and it's going from a 410 tip to a 210 tip. You know what I mean? Oh, 410, use it on my frames, doors. I've got some balustrating. I've got some smaller stuff to do. I'm going the 210. And you spray it, and mate, more runs than Donald Bradman on these things. You know what I mean? It's just like, what? And then you're like, what's happening? Like, I spray like this normally, and yeah, and you find out that why that's actually happening. And the interesting thing is, when you go from a 517 to a 417, you need to be moving a lot quicker. And the reason being is that, you're letting the same amount of paint out, but out of a much smaller fan. So, Todd, you want to go into, you want to elaborate into that and what happens there and why it's important?
Yeah, so I mean, most people have basic understanding around tips. They understand, the tip size is, the first number is you double it in inches. The technical reason is it's the technical definition is it's the angle. So 20 degree, 30 degree, 40 degree angle. And then the second number, which is the orifice or the hole, 10,000 of an inch. So let's take a 517, for example. So 517 down to a 17, 117 up to a 1217 if they make it. All those deliver really close to 1.2 liters a minute, all of them. So it's like if you sprayed a fan this big for if you spray a fan this big for 1 minute, it'll deliver 1.2 liters a minute for that minute. So you'll get 1.2 liters of paint spread across this all the way down here.
Nice. That sounds nice.
Yeah, but if you go to a 117, still going to deliver 1.17 liters in that minute. So you spray that same line in a minute, it's going to be so much thicker because they're taking all this paint and condensing it into one small area. That's why when you go from a 517 to a 417, you're like, holy crap, this is so much quicker. It is. It's like 15% quicker. It's not quicker. Oh, it is quicker, but it's the thickness is going to be 15% more because, the paint was spread this far. Now it's going to spread this far, but it's the same amount of paint coming out. And so once you realize that, you're like, oh, okay. So sometimes you'll see a scenario where you go too slow or too fast. Let's say 310 is too fast for my door. So guys will go and get a 308. That's a great idea. That's what I do. Slows it down a little bit. But now it's too slow. So it's like, what can you do instead? So instead of cutting it in half by going to tip size smaller, you go to a 410 because the 410 is actually going to spread it 25% more, which is going to slow it down 25% more. And it's like, some people will go, oh, but I'm spraying trim, I'm going to waste paint. It's like, bro, you would much rather waste this much more paint than have to come back, send back the runs and do it again. And so it's like, it's all, from a business point of view, it's all about efficiency and getting better and quicker. And it's like, and avoiding mistakes, because the mistakes will cost you money and time. So it's like, that's an absolute gold nugget there for people. Like if you're using a 517, you want to go a little bit slower, go to a 617. It's like nobody tells you that because it's just not common knowledge. And it just takes someone like me who's a nerd and spending all the time to figure that out to really understand it. But once it's explained to you, it's like, oh, you're right. I won't go from a 410 to a 210. I'll go from a 410 to a 208. Or I'll just stick with the 410 because I'm used to it. I just miss a little bit of it.
So as a general rule, what we like to tell people is if you want to go slower, then drop both numbers.
If you want to go not slower, but if you want to have a smaller fan
and
achieve the same experience. Because a 208 and a 410 will give you the same speed. You're not going to go slower, but you can spray this size without it being double the thickness.
True.
Sorry, I'm a nerd.
No, that's true. So, bro, just recapping on that. So, if you want to move slower or you want to move faster, how should you change your tip sizes?
Okay, so if you want to actually go slower, either have a wider fan.
So let's call it 517. If I want to go slower, what am I going down to?
So if you want to go slower, you either go from a 517 to a 515, which will reduce the flow about 15%. Or you can go from a 517 to a 617, which will spread it over about an extra 15%.
Okay.
Now, if you want to go spray something smaller. So if I want to go from, say I'm using a 617 to spray my walls, and now I want to spray a pillar, instead of going to a 317, which will actually double the thickness because you're cramming all that paint to here, you reduce both the 3 and the orifice. So you go. So if you want to go a similar speed, so you're not going crazy, you'd reduce the both numbers. You go from a 617 to a 313 or a 415 or whatever, because that will one reduce the fan size, but instead of increasing the paint, it'll reduce the flow as well. So you get a similar sort of feel. So you're not feeling like you're going slower or faster. And the reverse, if you want to go bigger or faster, not faster, but a bigger area, like say spraying roof membrane, instead of going from a 621 to a 623, like a 623 will actually produce, it'll be 15% quicker. So you go to a 627, which will be double the amount of paint, but it's spread over double the amount of space. So the film thickness will be the same. So when you're spraying it, it'll actually feel the same as if you're spraying a 621, which is what you want.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and that's good insight, man. That's why you're the spray wizard when it comes to that kind of stuff. Now, the other thing I was going to go on to is like another common thing, guilty as charged for this, but a lot of the time, you'd be using a 517 and you're spraying around 2000 psi, and it's like, I need to go faster. I want to go faster. Crank my machine up to 3000, leave the 517 tip in. So I just keep going, but really all I'm doing is creating a lot more overspray. And what we generally recommend is that to keep it about, if you're going over 2000 psi and you want to go faster, then you need to increase your tip sizes as you're going up.
Orifice.
Yes, orifice. Yep. So if you're a 517 guy and you want to go quicker, you're not a 2000 and you're going over 2000 psi, you could look at a 519 or even jump up to a 619, something like that. Yeah. Go bigger in that aspect, but yeah, we do find a lot of guys want to crank it up, and they're like, "Oh no, it's all right." But also how we look at it, if you're cranking at 3000 psi, your machine's working a lot harder, so you're going to get the wear and tear out of it as well. Yeah, but other thing, just to round out what we're talking about here. So the other thing, when it comes to tailing, what causes it? And how do we fix it?
So the most common causes of tailing is lack of flow rate, which is pretty much it, really, and lack of pressure. So it's probably more flow rate, but typically what happens is guys, when you're getting those hard tail lines, it's common with painters who are fresh on the gun because they're using a blue tip or something or a yellow tip and they want to set it like halfway up because they don't want to be too crazy. But oftentimes most of those paints that are out there need 1800, 2000 psi to atomize properly through a standard tip. So typically the normal way you'd fix it is you just crank the pressure up. But what a lot of guys do is, we tell people for the most part, it shouldn't be going much over 2000 psi. And the reason for that is because at 2000 psi, which is what the standard is. So all measurements in airless spray up until recently were all measured at roughly 2000 psi, 12 MPa, which is actually 1700 psi. From a foot away, and that's what the measurement is. So that's the garden spot. So when you're spraying, I think from a spray point of view, if you're at 2000 psi with a whatever size tip, in general you'll lose between 20 and 25% of your paint and overspray. And that's like garden spot. That's the best of the best. Okay, so then when guys don't realize, they'll crank it to 3000, but by doing nothing else, everything else is right. The distance is right. Your speed is right. Everything. Automatically, by cranking the pressure up, you reduce the coverage, and your wastage goes from 20 to 25% to 30 to 35% just by doing that. And all that's just overspray. So the overspray is a problem, but also that's not being put on the substrate. So you're actually reducing your coverage by 15% or something. And so that's not the way to do it. So what we typically recommend is if you're finding yourself in most scenarios, we'll make an exception when you're doing doors and trim and super fine finish. The more pressure, the better. But with most other applications, if you're finding yourself having to go much over 2,000 psi, your tip's probably a bit too small. So if I'm using a 517, for example, to spray ceiling flat, which is very common in the wintertime, guys struggle to get rid of tails in the wintertime using a 517. One of the reasons why I use a 517. So you'd jump it up to a 519. And the 519 will allow that to pass through 15% quicker. And then that alone oftentimes will get rid of the tails for you.
And what about if someone's using too small of a filter?
Yep, that's another thing too.
That would be, that can strangle the paint flow.
Yep, definitely. It's common with ceiling flat. We've said this before. They use a red filter in there to try and spray the cornice with fine finish tips.
Yep, because that's what they come with. Yeah.
Don't do that. Just you want to use the right tip. If you have to do something, it's like I would rather you, instead of cranking the pressure up or using a tip too small, and you can tell because you're starting to get tip blockages all the time. That's happening. That means your tip's too small. Go back up. If you're getting tails, thin it a little bit, warm it up. In the wintertime, it's a big deal. Stick it out in the sun for a little bit. Yeah, in the wintertime, it's common, because the paint's so much thicker. Guys have dramas in the wintertime with tails and ceiling flat and primer specifically for that because it's so much thicker. So just going to, you're saying this, you like to go to a 621. Chuck a 621 in there and those tails will disappear.
Yep. No, that's a good insight there, mate. There's some gold in there for people to take away. That's another episode in the books. Thanks for joining us. Until next time, keep on spraying.